with all of thine heart, and lean not to thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct thy path. Trust in the Lord. Just simple as that. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not to thine own understanding, but in all thy ways acknowledge him. And watch this. This is what he'll do. He shall direct thy path. Hallelujah. Anybody glad that God hears you? He sees us. All right. Just for a few minutes, I want to talk, since he says, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, lean not to thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, for he shall direct thy path. Just for a few minutes, I want to talk on this subject. I want to talk about someone you can trust. Someone you can trust. That means a lot for some of us. Someone you can trust. The word trust, brothers and sisters, simply means this. Just a simple definition of the word trust is this: to have confident expectation. That's what trust means. To have confident expectation. Let me get that to you once more again. To have confident expectation. Brothers and sisters, one of the most elusive things, one of the most hard to find things in this world, it's not something that's material. It's not something that you wear. It's not a piece of clothing. It's not a piece of jewelry. It's not an automobile. It's not a particular style of home. It's not a particular level of education. One of the things in this world that are hardest to find, to me, I believe, is finding someone you can trust. Amen. Because I believe that all of us here today, we be honest about it, all of us have had our share of dealing with folk who we thought that we could trust, people that we put all of our trust, as the old folk would say, put all of our eggs in one basket. Listen, and we put all of our heart into that, maybe that relationship, maybe that friendship, and you discover that everything that you put in was being taken for granted. Everything that you put in was being misused, and you were being misled and misinformed, and you found yourself on the short end of the stick. You was doing all the giving in order to discover that they were doing all of the taking. I don't know if you've ever been there, but I believe that most of us have had our share of situations where we dealt with people where they told us one thing but showed us another. They told you they love you but showed you that they didn't even like you. Anybody ever been there? Y'all come on, talk to me this morning. Maybe it's so crazy until it wasn't just enemies. It wasn't even just friends sometimes, but sometimes it got so heavy that it was family. People that have the same blood running through their veins as you, have the same last name, have the same features in their face, and don't nobody have to even ask a question. They can look at you and tell that you're kin to them. Sometimes those same people are the main culprits or the main suspects when it comes to being let down. And can I tell you something? Y'all might not know this, but every now and then folk will let you down. Y'all, yeah, man, listen, folk will let you down. Tell you, yeah, I'll be there, and you never see them. They'll tell you, yeah, I got your back, but you can't find them. Listen, when they need, you can always locate them, but when you need, their location is not on your GPS. Listen, I've discovered in this life, brothers and sisters, that people will let you down. That's why we're in a season of life now where life is really all about contracts and agreements, and you got to sign something for me to believe what you're going to say. I never will forget one afternoon, my auntie Nellie Mae Daniels sent me around the street to the grocery store to pick up just a few things for her. She said, She wrote down the few things she had on the list in her own handwriting and handed it to me. I said, Grandma, is this all you need? You sure? And I'm sitting here asking all these questions because I'm waiting on her to give me the money for what it is that she want me to buy. I said, Grandma, you sure this all it is? She gave me the list and turned around and started walking off. And I said, is there anything else you need? I kept on asking because I didn't have the money to pay for it, and I'm wondering what's going on. She didn't give me no card, no cash, nothing. And she looked at me and she said, boy, go on, do what I told you to do. I said, well, Auntie, you ain't give me no money. I don't want to steal it because you told me that's wrong. And she said, listen, when you get there, and the man that was at the stove, they call him Big Jack. And she said, tell Big Jack when you get to the store, tell him Miss Nellie Mae said she'll take care of Friday when she get her check. I looked at her and I said, what? So I went on around to the store. Wondering all the way around in my whole journey. I was thinking about this man gonna look at me like I'm crazy. Might call them folks on me because I'm talking about Auntie said she gonna pay for this stuff Friday and the day is Tuesday. But I got to the store and gave and picked up all the things and went up to the counter. Came up to the counter. He was ringing them up. And by the time he rang up the last item, he noticed that I wasn't reaching in my pocket to get nothing. And he looked at me and I looked at him. I said, oh, my auntie said, she said she'll pay you Friday. She'll come back and take care of the bill Friday. He looked at me and said, who is your auntie? I said, Miss Nellie Mae. He said, oh, all right. Tell her I said hello and gave me the receipt and the packages. And I left and went back to the house. I couldn't believe that. But later on in life, when I understood this one thing, that sometimes all you have is your word. And your word ought to be enough to get you to where you need to go, even when you ain't got what you need to get there. Brothers and sisters, but now, oh man, don't nobody trust nobody. I mean, listen, don't nobody trust nobody. You better not pick up nothing and talk about you gonna bring the money back Friday. You gonna be in jail until Friday. Listen, but we're in a time now where now you got to sign something. You got to sign your name. Matter of fact, about 4 or 5 papers before you can even get something. That's why we got contracts, prenuptial agreements, all these kinds of different things. And we got to listen. We got to let people know outside of our word, because now our word just ain't good enough. Too many scams going on. Too many, as my granddaddy would call them, too many shysters out here now. And so now our word is not enough, but we need something that we can sign to say that I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do, because people don't trust anybody. It's hard to trust people now. It's hard to trust people around your kid. Listen, you better not trust everybody around your kid. Listen, it's hard to trust people, man. I don't care what your position is, how long they've been knowing you. You can know somebody 20 years and they mess around and treat you in a way that they've never treated you before. It's amazing to know, brothers and sisters, that we're living in a time when it's hard to trust anybody. But I'm glad to know, brothers and sisters, that even despite the fact that it's hard for us sometimes to trust each other, it's hard for us sometimes to trust other people. But the reality is we're living in a time where we still have somebody to trust. I told you I wouldn't be long today. We have somebody to trust, and I wish you knew who it was, because even if you don't know, I'm glad to tell you. I learned how to trust in God. Is there anybody out here that has trust in God? I mean, listen, January 3rd of a year that we're calling 2020. Listen, we have a right and a reason to trust our God, because watch this, I trust him. I don't know about you. I trust him because he's done enough. I trust him because I've seen enough. I trust him because he opened enough doors for me. I trust him because he stopped enough enemies for me. I trust him because he brought me through enough valleys. I trust him because he made enough ways for me. Anybody feel the way I feel this morning? I mean, listen, I trust him. I trust him because he's been just that good to me. I trust him because every time I turn around, he keeps on blessing me. But you know the real reason why I trust God? I trust God because he knows who I am. He knows who I am, and he loves me for who I am. him. And that's what we ought to do as people. We ought to love each other for who we are. You might not like some people. Men. First lady was having this conversation last night. We were just talking, and as my uncle was say, shooting the breeze. And listen, I said, baby, you know what? Every now and then we got to remind ourselves that we have to just love people for who they are. Because after all, everybody has their ways, and so we can't judge nobody for having their ways. Listen, I got my ways, you got your ways. You know what you like, I know what I like. There's some stuff that bother me, there's some stuff that bother you. Listen, we all have our ways, but we have to learn how to love one another just for who we are. Because guess what? That's what God does for you. God knows you have attitude sometimes, but y'all ain't talking to me out here. God knows. Listen, God knows you act funny sometimes. Listen, you might try to hide it with folk, but God knows you. We act funny sometimes. God knows you have ways sometimes. God knows sometimes we're quick to judge somebody. Oh, he ain't about nothing. I can tell he ain't hitting on nothing. And that joker might be one of the best worshipers and best servants around. Listen, but God loves us for who we are. And that's the real reason why I trust him, because he trusts me. He loves me for who I am. And so the least I can do is trust my God. I trust him because now I've got confident expectations. Remember in the beginning, that's what I told you the word trust means. And so since I know what the word trust means, I can explain it like this. I have confident expectations in God. I have confident expectations that God will call, that God won't leave me, that God won't loose me, that God won't let me down. I've got trust in God, and I'm glad this morning as I hasten on through this message, I'm glad to tell you, brothers and sisters, that I've got someone to trust. Anybody glad that you got someone to trust? Yeah, those of you that's joining us this morning, that's our subject today. We're talking about I've got someone to trust from Proverbs 3 and 5. And listen, we don't serve a sometime God, and so we shouldn't be sometime believers. Oh man, listen, I think I'm preaching a little bit better than y'all saying amen. Listen, don't let me outdo you. Come on, get up here with me and beat me. Listen, we don't serve a God that acts fun. We don't serve a God that takes vacations. We don't serve a God, a funny acting God, but we serve a God that's always there when we need him, while we need him, and for whatever it is that we need him. How many can testify that he's there all the time? And so I'm so glad. I don't know how y'all feel, man, but I'm so glad God does not take vacations. I'm glad, man, God don't call in sick. Listen, I'm glad listen, have you ever thought about what if God put up a do not disturb sign in the sky and said, don't bother me for the next 2 weeks? Woo, Lord. Listen, he might as well call me on home now, because I know I wouldn't make it 2 weeks without God. Listen, what would we do? What would you do if God becomes unavailable? What would you do if God becomes unreachable, unapproachable? What would you do if you couldn't call God? Come on, y'all ain't talking to me. What would you do if you couldn't connect with God? What would you do? I'm convinced, brothers and sisters, that I wouldn't make it without God. Can anybody raise your hand and tell God right now, God, whatever you do in this season, don't do it without me. Don't leave me. Don't take your hands off me, because I can't make this journey without your help. Listen, I trust God. I trust him because he deserves to be trusted, because after all he's done for us, not only does he deserve my praise, but he deserves my trust. Listen, not only does he deserve our trust, but he desires it. That's what God wants. He wants us to trust him. That's simply that. God don't want your money all the time. God, matter of fact, when he asks for money, all he asks for is 1/10 of it. Y'all ain't talking to me. And while we're riding over that pothole, listen, let me drop the anchor right there and tell you that you do know what this is. This is a new year in the first month of the year, and the Bible teaches us that we ought to give God the first fruits of whatever it is that we harvest in. And so in other words, listen, here it is. If you are a member of a church, you are obligated to give God part of what he blesses you with in the first month. Listen. If you're a part of a church, if you're part of a church, your obligation is to that church that you are a member of. Yes, this preacher did say that. Listen, if you are a member of a church, you are obligated to bless God for your church. If not, then you are obligated to give to God based on where he leads you to give. Now, we would love for those that are not members here, possibly yet. Listen, but no, for real. Listen, God obligates you to give to where you are affiliated. If you're not affiliated somewhere, then you ought to ask God, say, God, lead me to a storehouse that I may bless you for how you bless me. All right, listen. But God deserves, he deserves to be trusted. He desires to be trusted because after all, why does he desire to be trusted? He desires to be trusted because that's the reason God sent Jesus, so that we would gain trust in God. He sent his only son. Listen, anybody that will die for you deserves to be trusted. Y'all ain't talking to me. The president's best friends should be the Secret Service. If there's nobody else that the president can count on and trust, it should be the Secret Service, because after all, I believe that the Secret Service would take a bullet for Donald Trump in his last days, that is, before Ivanka Trump will. That's his wife. I think that he trusts them when it comes to situations like that more than he do his own family, because they are trained, they are designed, their career is based on giving their life to protect the president of the United States. But listen, they trust the Secret Service like that. But listen, we serve a God who's more powerful than the Secret Service. Watch this. Matter of fact, the old folks said, ain't no secret to what God can do, what he done for others. He'll do it for you. Listen, God deserves our trust. He desires our trust. And so the best and the least that we can do in this season of life right now is trust God. Listen, here it is. Solomon comes to us today. Some theologians would suggest that maybe in Proverbs chapter 3, Solomon was talking to perhaps one of his own children, because he uses the word in the salutation, son. He uses the word son. He says, my son. He begins Proverbs 3 by addressing, he says, my son. And some would suggest maybe he was talking to his own children, but perhaps some would suggest that even it may not have been his own children, but it could have been somebody that he was mentoring. It's still a mystery who he was talking to, but despite of it being a mystery, these words can still prove to be strong. He was speaking wisdom into somebody's life, and here we are eavesdropping on the conversation that Solomon was having with someone else. And I'm glad I was able to sneak in and hear what he was telling them, because he said, listen, I need you to understand that life is not really that hard all the time. He said, listen, I need you to understand that you can make it, but you got to know who to put your trust in if you're going to make it. The common denominator, what makes the difference maker is whether or not you trust God. I'm here to tell you, church, sometimes the difference between a miracle and a mess is whether or not you trust God. Oh man, listen, I used to hate fractions in school. Man, I used to hate, Lord, I still hate them. Every time I think about fractions now, oh man, listen, fractions were so crazy, but the main thing that we learned about fractions is that the way to work out fractions is you got to find the common denominator. The word the number that evens up both sides of the fraction. Listen, the number that's going to even out and allow both sides to multiply, to make them even in numbers. Listen, God in the fractions of our life. Listen, when you got half of this and 1/4 of that, and you wonder how you gonna make it through the whole month. Y'all didn't hear what I said. I said you got half of this bill, you got a fourth for this bill, you got a third for this bill, and you say, God, how am I gonna make it through this whole month? I'll tell you how you're gonna make it, because God is the common denominator. Listen, God is the difference maker. maker, God said, listen, I'm going to join all of this together and subsidize for everything that you don't have. In other words, when you don't have enough, God shows up and says, I'll make it enough. Listen, you come at movie lovers. What are movie lovers? At Friday, one of our favorite as black folks, come on Friday, the movie Friday, Chris Tucker, the late Tiny Lister, Ice Cube. Listen, one of my favorite scenes is when Smokey was getting ready to go down. He was told to go down to the store by his mother. His mother said, I want some cigarettes. And she came and gave him $1. He said, wait a minute, this ain't enough. She responded to Smokey, looked at him, put her hand on her hip and said, make it enough. But that's what God does for us. God always makes it enough. Can anybody testify that there have been seasons there? Man, there have been seasons in my life when I didn't know how I was going to do it, where it was going to come from, but God showed up and made it enough. Won't he do it here? Listen. So what do you do? What do you do, preacher, when days are dark? What do you do when nights are long? What do you do when burdens are heavy? What do you do when money is funny? Amen. Simply trust God. Wish I had something deep and deep and articulate to tell you, but all I really want to tell you today is trust God. Don't sign in and out on trusting God. Don't log in on God for a few days while things are going well, and then log out on him while things are bad. Listen, you got to trust him when you're up, and you got to trust God when you're down. You got to trust God when you got joy, when everything is cool.